The chamber fell silent, not 12,000 delegates from across. 800 civilizations held their breath as the massive doors at the far end of the Grand Assembly Hall began to open. Light poured through the widening gap, silhouetting a single figure standing in the doorway. High Chancellor Moravix rose from his elevated throne, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the approaching form. His gray skin rippled with patterns of agitation that his species could not hide. Around him, the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful empires shifted in their seats. Their various appendages and sensory organs all focused on the same impossible sight. A human had entered the Galactic Council. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked forward with measured steps, her boots echoing against the crystal floor that had been designed to intimidate lesser species. She was small compared to most beings in this chamber. The Corthian warriors towered 3 meters tall. The Valorian diplomats stretched across multiple seats with their serpentine bodies. The crystalline luminari reflected light from 1,000 facets. Their very presence meant to blind and confuse. Elena noticed none of it. Or rather, she noticed everything and showed nothing. She stopped at the center of the chamber. Standing on the speaker's platform where countless civilizations had come to beg for membership, to plead for mercy, to surrender after devastating wars. The platform was designed to make the speaker feel small. Surrounded on all sides by rising tiers of alien faces looking down in judgment, Elena simply clasped her hands behind her back and waited. Chancellor Moravix leaned forward. You stand in the heart of galactic civilization, human. The concord of species has governed these stars for 40,000 years. We have witnessed the rise and fall of empires that lasted longer than your species has existed. And yet you come here, uninvited, unannounced, demanding an audience. His voice carried the weight of millennia. Around the chamber, delegates murmured their agreement. The luminary pulsed with angry red light. The Corthians gripped their ceremonial weapons. Elena's expression did not change. I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. I represent the Terran Accord, and I have not come to demand an audience. She paused, letting the silence build. I have come to deliver a message. The murmuring grew louder. Chancellor Moravix raised one of his 4 hands, and the chamber fell silent again. The Terran Accord, he said slowly. We know of your little collective human. Your species has been confined to a single system for 300 years. The prohibition zone around your world is the oldest and most sacred law of our concord. You were deemed too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society. Too violent. Too unpredictable. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber, showing a small yellow star with a single blue planet. This is all you have, Moravix continued. 1 world. 1 system. While we command millions of stars across the galaxy. What message could you possibly have that would interest us? Elena looked up at the hologram of Earth. A small smile crossed her face, so brief that most species in the chamber did not recognize it as an expression at all. 300 years ago, she said, your predecessors voted to contain humanity. They created the prohibition zone. They destroyed our colony ships. They killed 14 million of our people who are trying to settle new worlds. And then they sealed us away, expecting us to wither and die in isolation. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates across the chamber. We did not die. The holographic display flickered. The image of Earth disappeared, replaced by something that made even Chancellor Moravix lean back in shock. The prohibition zone, that sphere of space that had remained dark and silent for 3 centuries, was expanding. As they watched, it swallowed another star system, then another. The red boundary that marked forbidden space pulsed outward like a heartbeat. The Terran Accord has grown, Elena said. While you watched our prison, and congratulated yourselves on containing the human threat. We were building, learning, advancing. The prohibition zone was never our cage. She let her smile widen. It was our nursery. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. The Corthians drew their weapons. The Luminari flashed blinding patterns of panic. Chancellor Moravec hammered his ceremonial staff against the floor. But even his authority could not restore order. Elena stood motionless in the center of the storm, waiting. Finally, the chaos subsided. Military Commander Torval of the Corthian Empire stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human ambassador. His tusks gleamed in the chamber's light. "This is a declaration of war," he growled. "You have violated the prohibition. You have seized sovereign territory. The combined might of the Concord will crush your little species back into the dust you came from." Elena looked up at him without fear. "Commander Torval," she said calmly, 20 minutes ago, your home fleet received orders to mobilize against the Terran zone. 47 capital ships began charging their weapons. Torval's eyes widened. How could she know this? The orders had been encrypted, sent through secure channels. "Those ships no longer exist," Elena continued. "They have been removed from space-time. Your crews are unharmed. They have been deposited on a nearby moon with enough supplies to survive until rescue arrives. But the vessels themselves are gone, Commander, erased, as if they never existed." She reached into her pocket and produced a small device, which projected a hologram of empty space where Torval's fleet should have been. "We could have killed them," Elena said. "We chose not to. Consider this a demonstration of restraint. Consider it proof that we do not want war." Chancellor Moravec had finally regained his composure. He studied the human with new eyes, not as an amusing pest who had somehow bypassed security, but as something genuinely dangerous. "If you do not want war," he said carefully, "then what do you want?" Elena turned to face him directly. "Justice," she said. 300 years ago, the Concord voted to contain humanity. But that vote was not unanimous. We have the records, Chancellor. We know which species supported the prohibition. We know which ones argued against it. And we know which ones used the opportunity to raid our dying colonies for technology and resources." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Terran Accord seeks reparations from those who wronged us. We seek acknowledgement of the crimes committed. And we seek full membership in the Concord of Species, not as a confined prisoner, but as an equal partner." The chamber was utterly silent now. "And if we refuse?" Chancellor Moravec asked. Elena's smile faded. "Then in 90 cycles, the prohibition zone will expand again. And again. And again. Until there is nothing left of your precious Concord but memories and dust." She turned and began walking toward the exit. "You have 90 cycles to decide," she called over her shoulder. "I suggest you use them wisely." The massive doors opened before her, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall, leaving 12,000 stunned delegates behind. Chancellor Moravec stared at the closing doors for a long moment. Then he turned to his aide, a small being who had served him for centuries. "Find out everything we know about the humans," he said quietly. "Everything. The real records, not the propaganda we feed to the public." His aide hesitated. "Chancellor, those files are sealed by order of the original founders. Opening them would require—" "I know what it requires," Moravec interrupted. "Do it anyway, because I have the terrible feeling that we have made a mistake that will cost us everything. And I need to know exactly how badly we have doomed ourselves." In the corridor outside, Elena Vasquez walked alone, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She allowed herself one moment of private emotion, a deep breath, a slight trembling of her hands, before composing herself again. The first move had been made. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, but Elena knew something the Council did not. The expanding zone, the missing fleet, the technology that seemed like magic, it had all come at a price. And the ones who had given humanity these gifts were watching from the darkness between galaxies, waiting to collect their payment. The war with the Concord might be avoidable. What was coming after would not be. 72 cycles had passed since the human ambassador delivered her ultimatum. The galaxy had not slept since. Chancellor Moravix stood in the Archive of Founders, a chamber so secret that most species did not know it existed. The walls were lined with crystal memory cores, each one containing the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that had risen and fallen before the Concord was born. His aide had been right. Opening these files required the death codes of 3 former chancellors, the biometric signature of a living council member, and a sacrifice of blood. Moravix had provided all 3. Now, he stared at the holographic records playing before him, and he understood why these files had been sealed. The images showed Earth 300 years ago. A beautiful blue whirl. Teeming with life, surrounded by primitive but promising spacecraft. The humans had been young then, just learning to reach beyond their planet. They had sent messages of peace into the cosmos. They had dreamed of meeting other civilizations, and the Concord had answered their calls, but not with friendship. The footage showed the Galactic fleet descending upon Earth, not a diplomatic mission, but an armada. 12,000 warships from 50 species, carrying weapons designed to sterilize worlds. The humans had fought back with their primitive vessels, their nuclear weapons, their desperate courage. They had never stood a chance. Moravix watched as cities burned. Oceans boiled. Billions died in hours. The humans had begged for mercy, offered surrender, pleaded for their children's lives. The Concord had refused. Total elimination, the order had read. The human genome must be erased from existence. Their potential for violence makes them an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. But something had gone wrong. In the final moments of the attack, when only a few million humans remained, something had appeared. The records became corrupted here, filled with static and impossible images. Moravix could make out only fragment shapes that bent light around them, sounds that existed outside normal frequencies, and a voice that spoke in languages no species had ever heard. When the static cleared, the human survivors were gone. In their place was the Prohibition Zone, a sphere of space that no sensor could penetrate, no weapon could breach, no ship could enter, and a single message, broadcast on every frequency: we will remember. We will grow. We will return. Moravix shut off the recording. His hands were shaking. The Concord had not contained humanity to protect the galaxy. They had failed to complete a genocide, and they had lied about it for 3 centuries. Now the survivors were back, and they had help. A chime interrupted his thoughts. His personal communicator was receiving an incoming message impossible in this shielded chamber. Yet the signal came through anyway, displaying a single symbol he did not recognize. The message was brief. Turn on the emergency broadcast. Now. Moravix activated the nearest display screen. Every channel showed the same thing. The human ambassador, Elena Vasquez, stood at the edge of the Terran zone. Behind her, emerging from the forbidden space, was a vessel unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It was massive, the size of a small moon, and it moved without engines, appearing in one location and then another, as if space itself was being rewritten. Citizens of the Concord, Alana said, her voice calm and clear. I am joined today by Director Marcus Webb of Terran Strategic Command. He has a message for your leaders. The camera shifted to show a man in a simple gray uniform. His face was scarred, his eyes were cold, and his body moved with the precision of someone who had known violence intimately. 18 cycles ago, Director Webb said, the Korthian Empire attempted to send a strike force into the Terran zone through a dimensional fold. This was meant to be a secret operation, unknown even to your own council. The goal was to destroy our defensive grid before we could respond. He paused, and the display showed footage of Korthian warships entering a swirling portal. We detected them 3 days before they launched. We allowed them to enter the zone, and then we showed them what 300 years of development looks like. The footage changed. The Korthian ships emerged from their portal into what should have been human space. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by Terran vessels, thousands of them, moving in perfect coordination, their weapon systems humming with energy that registered on no known spectrum. The Korthian commander had ordered an immediate attack. His weapons had fired. Nothing happened. The energy simply vanished, absorbed into the hulls of the Terran ships, as if it were nothing. Then the Terran vessels had responded. In less than a minute, every Korthian ship was disabled. Crews were beamed off their vessels and deposited on a nearby planet. The ships themselves were taken apart at the molecular level, their components separated and catalogued. Your warriors are alive, Director Webb continued. Your technology has been studied and found wanting. But we did not destroy them, because we are not like you. We do not commit genocide against species we fear. His expression hardened. However, let me be absolutely clear. This was the last time we will respond with restraint. Any further military action against the Terran Accord will be met with proportional response. If you send a fleet, we will destroy a fleet. If you attack a colony, we will attack a colony. He leaned closer to the camera. And if you try to finish what you started 300 years ago, we will respond in kind. We know where your homeworlds are. We know your defensive systems. We have had 3 centuries to prepare. Do not test our patience again. The broadcast cut to Elena. The Concord has 18 cycles remaining to accept our terms, she said. We seek justice, not revenge. We seek equality, not domination. But we will not be ignored, and we will not be contained. The choice is yours. The broadcast ended. Chancellor Moravec stood in the darkness of the archive, surrounded by the lies of his predecessors. He understood now why the original founders had sealed these records. The truth would have torn the Concord apart, but the truth was emerging anyway, and the Concord would tear apart regardless. His communicator chimed again. This time, it was a legitimate signal from his security chief. Chancellor, the chief reported, we have a situation. Archivist Myra Thorne has been arrested attempting to access sealed human heritage files. She claims to be part of a faction called the Hollow Council. She says she has information you need to hear. Moravec frowned. What kind of information? There was a pause. She says she knows what the humans found in the void between galaxies. She says it is not a weapon, Chancellor. She says it is coming for all of us, and the humans are the only ones who can stop it. Moravec looked at the frozen image of the massive Terran vessel, hanging in space like a sleeping giant. Bring her to me, he said quietly, and tell no one. It seems we have far more to fear than human vengeance. In the detention center, Archivist Myra Thorne sat in her cell, waiting. Her human ancestry was subtle, a slight difference in her bone structure, a particular shade in her eyes, but it was there. Her grandmother had escaped the genocide aboard a refugee ship, eventually settling on a Concord world and hiding her origins. For 3 generations, her family had waited for this moment. They had infiltrated the Concord's institutions, gathered intelligence, and prepared for the day when humanity would return. That day had come, but Myra knew something that even the Terran leadership did not fully understand. She had spent decades studying ancient records, piecing together fragments of knowledge from a dozen extinct civilizations. She had learned about the architects, the beings who had answered humanity's desperate cry 3 centuries ago. They were not saviors. They were not allies. They were something far older and far more terrible than any species in the galaxy could imagine, and they were coming to collect what they were owed. The cell door opened. Chancellor Moravex entered, his 4 eyes studying her with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. "Tell me everything," he said. Myra smiled. "It will not be pleasant to hear. Nothing about this situation is pleasant. Speak." Myra took a breath and began the story that would change everything. The Chancellor thought he knew about the universe and about the true price of human survival. Myra's voice echoed in the cold detention cell as Chancellor Moravex listened with growing horror. 300 years ago, she said, when your predecessors were burning Earth and killing billions, the surviving humans did something desperate. They sent a signal into the void between galaxies, a cry for help aimed at the empty darkness where no stars shine. Moravex shifted uncomfortably. The intergalactic void is empty. Nothing lives there. That is what we believed, Myra replied. We were wrong. Something ancient heard that signal. Something that existed before our galaxy formed, before the first stars ignited. The humans call them the architects. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. The architects offered humanity a bargain. They would give the survivors knowledge, technology, and the means to protect themselves from extinction. In exchange, humanity would serve as their experiment. They wanted to observe what a species driven to the absolute edge of death could become. And the humans accepted? They had no choice. It was accept or die. So they took the gift and retreated behind the barrier the architects helped them create. For 3 centuries, they learned. They grew. They transformed themselves into something the architects found fascinating. Myra paused, choosing her next words carefully. But experiments end, Chancellor. Data is collected, and the architects have been harvesting civilizations for millions of years. They consume everything technology, genetic material, consciousness itself. They add it to their collective and move on to the next galaxy. Moravex's skin had gone pale. You are saying these beings are coming here? They are already here. The Terran leadership knows this. That is why they emerged from the zone now, not 50 years ago or 50 years from now. They are preparing for war, Chancellor. Not against you. She pointed upward, toward the darkness between stars. Against them. Before Moravex could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. Emergency lights flooded the corridor with red. His communicator erupted with panicked voices. Chancellor. Unknown contacts emerging at the galactic rim. Hundreds of them. They are not responding to any communication. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Moravex ran. He reached the command center to find chaos. Officers were shouting at each other. Display screens showed impossible images vessels, the size of small moons, moving without propulsion, appearing and disappearing from sensor range as if they were blinking in and out of existence. How many? Moravex demanded. We have counted over 2,000 so far, his sensor chief reported, her voice trembling. But more keep arriving. They are spreading across the galactic rim in a pattern that will encircle us within days. The main display flickered, and a new signal appeared. It was broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously, in every known language. A voice spoke. It was not a single voice, but thousands of voices layered together, creating a sound that hurt to hear. Subjects of the current galactic civilization. We are the architects. Your development has been monitored. Your potential has been assessed. The time for harvest has arrived. The screen showed one of the architect vessels up close. Its surface was constantly shifting, made of materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Geometric patterns flowed across its hull like living things. Resistance is observed in your species. This is acceptable. Your struggle will be recorded and analyzed. When harvest is complete, your consciousness will join the collective. Your knowledge will contribute to the eternal archive. This is not death. This is transcendence. The transmission ended. Moravec stood frozen, unable to process what he had just witnessed. Around him, his officers were equally paralyzed. In a single moment, everything they thought they knew about the universe had been shattered. His communicator chimed. A familiar voice spoke. Chancellor Moravec's. It was Ambassador Elena Vasquez. I believe we need to talk. 20 minutes later, Moravec stood aboard a Terran vessel for the first time. The technology surrounding him was beyond anything that Concord had developed walls that seemed to respond to thought. Displays that existed partially in dimensions he could not perceive. And a pervasive sense of power humming through every surface. Elena met him in a conference room along with Director Webb and a woman he did not recognize. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka, Elena said. She commands our defensive forces. Admiral Tanaka was small even by human standards, but her eyes carried a weight that Moravec recognized. She had seen death many times and had learned not to fear it. 300 years ago, Tanaka said without preamble, the architects saved us from your genocide. They gave us knowledge that accelerated our development by millennia. But they made it clear from the beginning that we were not allies. We were investments. She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy with architect positions marked in red. What you see at the rim is not their main force. These are scouts establishing perimeter control. The primary harvest fleet is still in transit from the intergalactic void. We estimate it will arrive in approximately 30 cycles. Moravec felt sick. How large is the primary fleet? Millions of vessels. Enough to strip this galaxy of all sentient life within a single generation. The room was silent. There is another option, Director Webb said. The architects are not invincible. During our 3 centuries in the zone, we studied them obsessively. We developed weapons specifically designed to harm their dimensional structure. We created defenses that can resist their consumption technology. He looked directly at Moravec. But we cannot fight them alone. Even with everything we have built, we are not strong enough to stop the primary fleet. We need the resources and manpower of the entire galaxy working together. Elena stepped forward. We know what your predecessors did to us. We know about the genocide, the lies, the centuries of propaganda. We have every reason to let the architects consume you while we retreat behind our barriers and fight alone. Her expression was hard but not cruel. But that is not who we choose to be. Revenge would feel satisfying for a moment, but it would doom us all eventually. The architects will not stop with the Concord. They will come for us too, no matter how long we hide. She extended her hand toward Moravec. We are offering you a chance to survive. Full military alliance against the architects. Shared technology, shared resources, shared command. In exchange, we require 3 things. Moravec hesitated. Name them. First, full disclosure of the genocide to all Concord species. No more lies. He nodded slowly. That will cause political chaos, but it is just. What else? Second, reparations to be determined after the war. We do not expect payment now, but we will not forget what is owed. Acceptable. And the third? Elena's expression softened slightly. We want our people back. There are human descendants scattered across the Concord, hiding their ancestry for fear of persecution. Archivist Myra Thorne is one of thousands. We want them to have the choice to come home, if they wish. Moravec thought of Myra, sitting in her cell, waiting to see if her gamble had paid off. "That is not unreasonable," he said. He took Elena's hand and shook it in the human custom. "I cannot promise the entire Concord will agree," he warned. "Many species will reject alliance with humanity. Old hatreds run deep." "We know," Admiral Tanaka said. "That is why we are giving them a demonstration." The display screen changed to show the galactic rim. One of the Architect's scout vessels was approaching a Concord colony world, ignoring all attempts at communication. "Watch," Tanaka said. A Terran vessel appeared beside the Architect's scout smaller, faster and crackling with energy that seemed to tear at the fabric of space itself. The Architect vessel turned toward this new arrival, likely intending to consume it. The Terran ship fired. The weapon was not light or energy in any conventional sense. It was a focused disruption of dimensional stability, a targeted wound in the structure of reality itself. The Architect vessel shuddered as the blast struck it. Its constantly shifting surface flickered and froze. Cracks appeared in its impossible geometry. Then it exploded, scattering debris across space that dissolved into nothing before it could touch the colony world below. The display showed dozens of similar engagements happening simultaneously across the rim. Terran vessels striking Architect scouts and destroying them. "We can hurt them," Tanaka said. "We can kill them. But we cannot defeat millions of them alone. That is the truth." Moravec stared at the display, watching the impossible become possible. "I will address the Concord," he said finally. "I will tell them the truth about Earth. I will show them this footage. And I will pray that fear of extinction outweighs centuries of hatred." He paused at the door. "If this works," he said quietly, "if we somehow survive, what then? Will you still want justice?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "We will always want justice, Chancellor. But justice and revenge are not the same thing. We learned that lesson in the ashes of our world." She turned away. "Now go. Rally your species. We have 30 cycles to unite a galaxy that has spent millennia learning to distrust itself. The Architects are counting on us to fail." Her voice hardened. "Let us disappoint them." Chancellor Moravec stood before the Grand Assembly for the second time in a month. The first time, he had been watching a human ambassador deliver an ultimatum. Now, he was about to destroy everything the Concord had built on a foundation of lies. The chamber was full. Every species, every faction, every power that mattered had sent representatives. They knew something terrible was happening at the galactic rim. They had heard rumors of impossible vessels and unstoppable weapons. They wanted answers. Moravec gave them the truth. He showed them the sealed records of the Earth genocide. He showed them the footage of burning cities and boiling oceans. He showed them the orders signed by his predecessors, commanding the complete extinction of the human species. And then he showed them the Architects. The chamber descended into chaos. Some delegates screamed. Others wept. A few tried to flee, as if running could save them from what was coming. The Corthian representatives drew weapons and pointed them at each other, arguing about who had known what and when. But slowly, as Moravec continued to speak, the chaos subsided. Fear has a way of uniting those who would otherwise remain enemies. "We have 28 cycles before the primary Architect fleet arrives," Moravec said. "The humans have offered us an alliance. They have the technology to fight these beings. They have spent 300 years preparing for exactly this moment. But they cannot do it alone." He spread his forearms wide, encompassing the entire chamber. "We can argue about guilt and blame after we survive. If we survive. Right now, we must make a choice. Do we stand together, or do we die separately?" Admiral Torval of the Corthian Empire rose from his seat. His face was twisted with conflicting emotions. Moravec knew that Torval had lost his brother in the failed attack on the Terran zone. He had every reason to hate humans, but Torval was also a soldier. He understood existential threats. "My people will stand with the Alliance," he said, his voice rough. "We do not forgive the humans for destroying our fleet, but we will fight beside them against a greater enemy." One by one, other delegations rose. The Crystalline Luminari, the Serpentine Vilorians. Even species that had been at war with each other for centuries put aside their differences. Not everyone agreed. Some stormed out, declaring that they would find their own solutions. Others simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the magnitude of what they were facing, but enough agreed. The alliance was formed. Within hours, the greatest military mobilization in galactic history began. Fleets that had been pointing weapons at each other now flew in formation toward the rim. Factories that had been building warships for internal conflicts were retooled to produce weapons based on Terran designs. Scientists from 100 worlds shared research that had been guarded for millennia, and at the center of it all, humanity worked tirelessly to prepare. Myra Thorne walked through the corridors of the Terran command vessel, still adjusting to her new reality. She had spent her entire life hiding her human heritage. Now she wore it openly, marked by the simple gray uniform of a Terran officer. Director Webb had given her a choice: return to her old life in the Concord, or join the effort to save the galaxy. The choice had been easy. Now she served as a liaison between human and Concord forces, translating not just languages, but ways of thinking. It was exhausting work, but necessary. 3 centuries of separation had created a gap between human and alien perspectives that could not be. Bridged in Days Dot, she found Admiral Tanaka on the observation deck, watching the Allied fleet assemble. Thousands of vessels from dozens of species filled the view screen, their running lights creating a constellation of defiance against the darkness. "It is beautiful," Myra said. Tanaka nodded. "It is. I spent 200 years in cryosleep, waiting for the day humanity would emerge from the zone. In my dreams, I always imagined us fighting alone. I never expected this." She turned to face Myra. "You understand both sides. What do you think our chances are?" Myra considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I do not know. The architects have consumed thousands of civilizations across millions of years. They have never been defeated, but they have also never faced an enemy that was specifically preparing for them." She gestured at the fleet outside. "This is unprecedented. Hundreds of species working together, combining their technology and resources. The architects consume individual civilizations. They may not be prepared for a united galaxy." Tanaka smiled slightly. "That is what we are counting on." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert. Architect scout vessels were approaching the defensive perimeter in force. This was the largest engagement, yet over 300 enemy ships. Testing the Allied defenses, Tanaka immediately moved to the command center. Myra's following close behind. The battle that followed was brutal. Terran vessels led the attack, their dimensional weapons cutting through architect hulls. But the architects were adapting. Their ships now moved in patterns designed to avoid concentrated fire. They had begun deploying countermeasures that partially blocked the chi. Disruption waves. Allied vessels from a dozen species supported the Terran forces, using their own weapons to weaken enemy shields before human ships delivered the killing blows. It was an imperfect coordination, hampered by communication delays and incompatible systems. But it worked. 3 hours later, the last architect scout was destroyed. The Allied fleet had lost 47 vessels and over 10,000 lives. But they had proven that the architects could be beaten. Chancellor Moravec watched the battle from his personal vessel, far behind the front lines. When the final enemy ship fell, he allowed himself a moment of hope. That hope was shattered by an incoming transmission. The Architect Collective was speaking again. their layered voices echoing through every communication system in the galaxy. Combat capability observed. Resistance level elevated. Harvest timeline accelerated. Primary fleet arrival 12 cycles. Moravec felt his blood run cold. 12 cycles. They had expected 30. The architects were moving faster because they had seen the alliance forming. Another transmission followed, this one from Director Webb. They are trying to overwhelm us before we can fully mobilize. We need to change our strategy. We cannot wait for them to come to us. What are you proposing? Moravec asked. A strike mission. We have identified what we believe is the Architect Command structure, massive vessel at the center of their fleet that coordinates the harvest. If we can destroy it, we may be able to disrupt their organization enough to give ourselves a fighting chance. How many ships would such a mission require? Webb's face was grim. 1. The mission requires infiltrating the heart of the Architect fleet. A large force would be detected and destroyed. Our only chance is a single ship, small enough to slip through their perimeter, carrying a weapon powerful enough to destroy their command vessel. Moravec understood immediately. A suicide mission. Yes, we need volunteers from every allied species. Beings who understand that they will not return. Beings willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to save everyone else. Moravec thought of his own people, of the children who would never grow up if the architects succeeded. I will go, he said quietly. Webb looked surprised. Chancellor, you are needed here. The Alliance requires your leadership. The Alliance requires hope, Moravec replied. And what greater hope than seeing the leader of the Concord willing to die alongside humans? It will prove that our unity is real, not just words. He straightened, decision made. Find me other volunteers. Beings from as many species as possible. Let the architects face a strike team that represents the entire galaxy they are trying to consume. Webb nodded slowly. We launch in 48 hours. I hope you know what you are doing, Chancellor. Moravec thought of the burning cities of Earth, the genocide his predecessors had ordered, the centuries of lies. I am doing what I should have done 300 years ago, he said. I am standing with humanity instead of against them. Perhaps the universe will remember that, even if we fail. He turned to watch the Allied fleet regroup after the battle, already preparing for the next engagement. Perhaps it is time for the Concord to learn what humans have always known, that sometimes survival requires sacrifice. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Architect primary fleet continued its inexorable approach, carrying the doom of galaxies within its endless ranks. 12 cycles remained. The strike vessel was called Remembrance. It was small compared to the warships of the Allied fleet, but it carried technology that represented the combined knowledge of 100 worlds. Its hull could bend light, making it nearly invisible. Its engines operated in frequencies that the architects could not easily detect. And in its core rested a weapon that had never been tested, a dimensional bomb capable of collapsing reality. Itself in a localized area. 20 volunteers boarded the vessel. Chancellor Moravec represented the Concord leadership. Admiral Torval represented the Corthian military. Ambassador Crix of the Valorians had insisted on joining despite having no combat training. Representatives from a dozen other species filled the remaining slot scientists. Soldiers, diplomats, all willing to die for the chance to save their peoples. Leading them all was Admiral Yuki Tanaka. She stood at the front of the briefing room as the Remembrance prepared to launch. Our target is the Architect Command Nexus, she said, displaying a holographic image of a massive vessel at the center of the approaching fleet. Intelligence suggests that this ship coordinates the harvest operation. If we destroy it, the remaining Architect vessels may lose cohesion long enough for the Allied fleet to engage them on favorable terms. She paused, looking at each volunteer in turn. I will not lie to you. The probability of survival is close to zero. We will be flying into the heart of the largest hostile fleet ever recorded. We will be surrounded by enemies who can detect dimensional disturbances. And even if we succeed in delivering the weapon, the blast radius means we will not escape. Torval stood. We understood the terms when we volunteered. Speak no more of survival. Tell us how to complete the mission. Tanaka nodded. The plan is simple. We approach using dimensional folding to bypass their outer perimeter. We emerge as close to the command nexus as possible. We deliver the weapon and detonate it manually. Why manually? Moravec asked. Because the architects have already adapted to our remote detonation systems. They can block our signals. The only way to guarantee detonation is physical presence. She brought up a new display showing the bomb itself a sphere of impossible angles that hurt to look at directly. This weapon was designed specifically for this mission. It destabilizes the dimensional structure that architect vessels use to exist in our reality. When detonated, it will collapse every architect ship within a radius of 10,000 kilometers back into the void between dimensions, including the command nexus. Myra Thorne raised her hand. She had argued fiercely for a place on this mission, and Tanaka had finally relented. What happens to the beings inside the architect collective? The consumed consciousnesses? Tanaka's expression softened. We do not know. They may be destroyed along with the vessels. They may be freed. Our scientists could not determine the answer. Myra nodded slowly. Then I will find out. The final preparations were completed in hours. Ambassador Elena. Vasquez came aboard briefly to say goodbye. She embraced Tanaka, the two women holding each other for a long moment. We have been preparing for this our entire lives, Elena said quietly. 300 years of waiting. And now it comes down to 1 ship and 20 volunteers. 21, Tanaka corrected. You forgot to count Director Webb. Elena's eyes widened. Marcus is on board? He insisted. He said someone needed to make sure the bomb actually detonated. And he has died fighting architects before. He knows what to expect. Elena laughed despite herself. Of course he did. That stubborn fool. She stepped back, composing herself. Good luck, Admiral. I will hold the line until you return. I will not return, Tanaka said gently. But I will give you the chance to win. That is enough. The Remembrance launched into the darkness. The journey took 6 hours. The crew spent the time in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Moravec meditated on the failures of his predecessors, and his hope that this final act might somehow atone for their crimes. Torval sharpened his ceremonial blade, preparing to face death as a warrior. Myra reviewed every piece of information they had about architect consciousness, searching for any way to help the trapped beings inside. And Director Webb sat beside the weapon, running final diagnostics, his scarred hands steady despite what was coming. When they emerged from Dimensional Fold, the architect fleet surrounded them. Millions of vessels stretched across space in every direction. Each one was the size of a moon. Each one pulsed with energy that existed partially outside normal reality. The sight was overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful in a way that should not have been possible. At the center of it all was the command nexus, a construct so large that it defied comprehension. Its surface was covered with geometric patterns that shifted and flowed like living things. Tendrils of pure energy connected it to thousands of surrounding vessels. We have been detected, Tanaka announced calmly. Enemy vessels are converging. Time to target, 7 minutes. The Remembrance dove toward the Nexus, its engines pushing beyond safe limits. Architect vessels moved to intercept, their weapons charging with dimensional disruption fields. "Evasive maneuvers," Tanaka ordered. The ship twisted through impossible angles, using technology that bent space itself to dodge incoming fire. But there were too many enemies, too many weapons, too much converging death. "Hull breach on Deck 3, an officer reported. "Casualties on Deck 5. Engine 2 is offline." Torval growled. "We are not going to make it." "Yes, we are," Webb said, rising from his seat beside the weapon. "Admiral, I am taking the bomb to the airlock. Get me within range, and I will finish the mission." Tanaka understood immediately. "You cannot survive the vacuum for more than a few seconds." "I only need a few seconds." He began dragging the weapon toward the rear of the ship. "Keep flying. Get as close as you can." Myra moved to help him. Together, they maneuvered the dimensional bomb into the airlock chamber, sealing themselves inside. "You do not have to do this," Webb said. "You could go back." Myra shook her head. "I spent my whole life hiding what I am, running from my heritage. I will not run from this." She looked at the weapon. "Besides, someone needs to try to save the consumed ones. If there is any chance they can be freed instead of destroyed, I want to take it." Webb smiled, a rare expression on his scarred face. "You are brave, Myra Thorne. Your ancestors would be proud." The ship shuddered violently. More damage reports flooded the bridge. The remembrance was coming apart around them. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom. "We are within range. Detonation will take out the command nexus. Good luck." Webb looked at Myra one last time. "Are you ready?" She took a deep breath. Yes. The airlock opened. They were ejected into the vacuum of space, surrounded by the chaos of battle. Architect vessels swarmed around them, weapons firing. The remembrance exploded behind them, taking 3 enemy ships with it. But Webb and Myra were still moving, propelled by the airlock's emergency thrust, carrying the dimensional bomb toward the surface of the command nexus. Webb's body failed first. The vacuum was too much even for his enhanced physiology. But before he died, he activated the detonation sequence. Myra felt the bomb begin to pulse. She had seconds left. With her last strength, she reached out not with her hands, but with her mind. The Terran modifications she had received gave her a fragment of the ability that humans had developed during their isolation. She touched the dimensional structure of the Nexus, pushing through layers of alien consciousness, and she found them. The consumed ones. Millions of minds, trapped in a prison of light and geometry, screaming silently for an eternity. "You are free," she whispered, though no sound could carry in the vacuum. "We are all free." The bomb detonated. Reality collapsed. The command nexus tore apart, its dimensional structure unraveling like fabric pulled by invisible hands. Around it, thousands of architect vessels shuddered and went dark, their coordination destroyed, and something else happened. Something the scientists had not predicted. The consumed consciousnesses did not die. They flowed out of the collapsing dimension, streaming into the void like a river of light. Millions of minds finally released from their prison, spreading across the galaxy in an instant. Some chose oblivion, embracing the peace of true death after eons of imprisonment. Some chose rebirth, their consciousness flowing into compatible hosts, bringing ancient knowledge and perspective to species that would never fully understand the gift they had received. And some, the youngest, those who still remembered what it meant to be alive, chose to stay. They gathered in the void, forming a new collective, bound by choice rather than consumption. They remembered Myra. They honored her sacrifice. And they watched as the galaxy she had saved began the long process of rebuilding. In the aftermath of the battle, the Allied fleet found victory. Without the command nexus, the architect fleet lost cohesion. Individual vessels scattered, some fleeing into the intergalactic void, others simply shutting down and drifting in space, that the war was not over. It would take years to hunt down the remaining architect vessels. But the existential threat had been broken. Chancellor Moravex did not survive. His body was found in the wreckage of the Remembrance, still at his station, still fighting to keep the ship alive long enough to complete the mission. Admiral Torval survived somehow, recovered from the debris field by Allied rescue ships. He returned to the Korthian Empire a hero, though he never spoke of what he had seen aboard the Command Nexus. Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the sunrise on a restored Earth 1 year later. The planet was still scarred, still healing from the wounds inflicted 3 centuries ago. But humans were returning, building new cities, planting new forests, creating a new civilization that remembered its past without being trapped by it. She received a visitor that morning, a young being made of light, speaking with a voice that carried echoes of millions. "We are what remains of the consumed," the being said. "We have chosen to help rebuild what was destroyed. We have knowledge spanning millennia, technology from 1,000 worlds. We offer it freely, in memory of the one who freed us." Elena looked at this impossible creature, born from tragedy and sacrifice. "Myra Thorne," she said quietly. "She is remembered. She is honored. She is the reason we exist as free beings rather than prisoners." The being extended what might have been a hand. "Will you accept our help?" Elena thought of everything humanity had survived. The genocide, the isolation, the war with the architects. They had been forged in suffering, tempered by patience, strengthened by hope. They had learned that survival sometimes required sacrifice. But they had also learned that survival meant nothing without compassion. "Yes," she said, taking the offered hand. "We accept." The sun rose higher over Earth, casting light across a world that had been saved by the species it had tried to destroy, defended by the beings it had tried to consume, and would now be rebuilt by the unity of all who remained. The Terran Accord had declared war. But in the end, what they won was not territory or revenge. It was peace. Hard-earned, costly, fragile, but real. And that was worth everything.